More than 2.6 million people vote in Singapore under strict coronavirus measures. The mayor of South Korea's capital, Seoul, found dead days after sexual harassment allegations were filed against him. Australia locks the state of Victoria down due to the increasing COVID-19 cases. And we'll go to Spain, where bullfighting looks set to resume amid an uncertain future. Hello, welcome to The World Today. I'm Zoyun, live in Beijing. Well, we'll start in Singapore, where voting is underway in Southeast Asia's first election since the coronavirus pandemic began. Over 2.6 million Singaporeans are expected to cast their ballots in over 1,000 polling stations. COVID-19 means voters have been asked to wear masks and gloves. Sample counts are expected soon after polls close at 8 p.m. local time. The full makeup of the next parliament is likely to be known by early Saturday morning. Mira Liu tells us about the big issues and leading candidates.
Amongst the candidates is the nation's Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee-keat, the man tipped to succeed Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong when he steps down. In a surprise move, DPM Heng left his stronghold of 9 years to face off against the main opposition Workers' Party in an important and hotly contested constituency.
It is a big risk to move the Prime Minister in waiting, from his safe seat, to a seat, that has traditionally been known to be one of the weakest multi-member seat for the ruling party.
The news that really stirred the pot was the decision of Prime Minister Lee's younger brother, Lee Hsien Loong, joining the Progress Singapore Party, or PSP. However, he chose not to run, as he believes Singapore doesn't need another Lee in the government.
It boils down to how the public perceives, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong on the campaign trail. Do they see him as a divisive figure?
The coming general election will be a watershed.
But if Mr. Lee Hsien Loong is seen as someone whose message is credible, that indeed he's able to point to what is wrong with the ruling party, then obviously, his being on the campaign trail will be a tremendous boost, to the PSP.
Meanwhile, as a result of COVID-19 and its economic impact, immigration and jobs have become a hot-button issue this year, with most parties calling for reducing dependency on foreign labor. Other issues being discussed include setting up a minimum wage for Singaporeans and delaying a proposed tax hike. The ruling party saw its vote share fall to 60.1% in the 2011 elections, but rebounded to 69.9% of the vote in 2015.
Mira Liu, Cgtn, Singapore.
South Korean police have found the body of Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon after a 7-hour search. Park had been the mayor of Seoul since 2011 and was considered a potential frontrunner for 2022 presidential elections. Jack Barton reports from Seoul.
It does appear more and more that it is a case of suicide. Certainly that is the indication of the note that he left in the family home yesterday, the contents of which were revealed about an hour ago. In it, the note, the deceased mayor, the former mayor of Seoul, Park Won-soon, said that he said goodbye to everyone. He said sorry to everyone. He said sorry in particular to his family and said he had caused them nothing but pain. He requested that he be cremated and that his ashes be spread at the site where his parents' ashes are interred. So that was the note that his daughter found that caused the alarm, that caused her to contact the police after about 5 p.m. last night when his phone had been off for many hours, and prompted that large manhunt of about 600 police officers using drones, combing through the mountainous area just behind the family home where the last signal from his mobile phone was seen. And that is the spot, or that is the area where just after midnight, so literally 1 minute into the early hours of this morning, his body was found in that park. And again, police ruling out homicide at the moment. They're saying there are no indicators on his body that it was homicide, and they're pursuing the line that it is most likely suicide, though they haven't confirmed that yet. In the meantime, his body is being kept down at the Seoul National University Hospital, where many of his supporters have gathered outside in mourning.
To Japan now, where the central and southwestern regions have been devastated by floods and landslides. More than 60 people have died and over a dozen remain unaccounted for. Here's our correspondent Grace Lee with more.
Things are still very tense here, and we still have more rain on the way. According to experts, they say we might see more heavy rainfall over the weekend. And now a major concern for authorities here is that we're seeing rainfall, record rainfall, that Japan hasn't seen in a very long time. And they're worried that people may underestimate how quickly their homes may become flooded. And now with the threat of coronavirus, it seems a lot of people are reluctant to leave their homes. A lot of them are staying in their cars in fear of catching the virus from one of these shelters. So they are urging people to have a plan, to think ahead of what might happen if the flooding starts to happen in their region. Now, the search does continue for those who are unaccounted for. 4,000 homes have been flooded, and the damage is pretty extensive. Authorities are now looking into ways to help the people who have had their homes and businesses destroyed.
Authorities in China have issued the second highest alert for flooding in the middle and lower reaches of Yangtze River, the longest river in the country. That covers communities from Chenglingji to Nanjing, the Dongting Lake region and Poyang Lake region. Continuous heavy rain is forecast for the next 2 days. Nicole Ng has more on the nationwide situation.
Homes destroyed, roads paralyzed, many left stranded without food or electricity. Torrential rain has flooded dozens of cities across southern China, especially along the Poyang Lake Basin. In southeastern China's Fujian province, the highest level alert was issued in Wuyishan. The local rescue team mobilized 160 people, 12 boats and 23 vehicles. Many of the stranded are old and vulnerable. First responders used stretchers or carried them on their backs. Evacuees were transferred to the boats and then to the safe zone. Among those rescued was a newborn baby. Floodwater also submerged the Tiantang River Basin in Jiangxi province. After the Xinpei embankment was breached, the local flood control departments deployed over 100 vehicles, 50,000 sandbags and had more stones and pebbles on hand. There was a 50-meter breach on the Wenguidao embankment. Over 9,000 villagers in nearby communities have been evacuated, but the breach keeps growing. First responders are speeding up to bring in more stones to be placed as needed. In Zhejiang province, the Xinanjiang Reservoir has opened all its 9 floodgates for the first time ever. It's reported the discharge was 6,600 cubic meters per second. The flood emergency response has been raised to the highest level.
Major rivers in Anhui province are now still seeing waters rise above the warning level, and Hubei province could be in another round of downpours in the coming days. Our reporters Yang Chengxi and Zhou Jiaxing brings us more details on the ground.
Shexian County is among the hardest hit areas in Anhui province during the recent week. The damage of a major flood this week, which local authorities called the biggest one in 50 years, will take much longer time to repair. Now, China's Ministry of Emergency Management said on Thursday that about 1.6 million people have been affected in this province, and we saw this number rising several times in recent weeks. It is estimated that the economic cost done by the recent rain and flood could reach over 6 billion yuan. Now, the threat is far from over. It's not past us yet, because the water levels of the over 20 major rivers in Anhui province are still above warning level.
The emergency authorities in Hubei province say that the rainy season this year came 10 days earlier than normal, and the rainfall in many areas here hit record highs, with water levels reaching above the Yangtze Basin warning mark. Hubei has also upgraded its natural disaster relief response and deployed thousands of tents, rollaway beds and life jackets to cities in need. And financial aid is also in its plans to help safeguard the daily life for those affected. And meteorological authorities say that the next round of strong rainfall is expected to arrive this weekend. with more thunderstorms and gale. So that will be a continuous pressure for the local and also the regional flood control.
You're watching breaking news on Cgtn.
Welcome to the world today on Cgtn.
To Australia, where millions are now under lockdown again in Victoria, the second most popular state. It comes amid a surge in cases, which has seen the state's border with New South Wales closed for the first time in over 100 years. For more, here's our correspondent Greg Navarro reports.
You've got to remember that there are tens of thousands of people who live in these cross-border communities all along the New South Wales-Victoria border, many of them sharing economies, sharing shops, businesses, sharing health services and hospitals as well. So the fact that there's an actual border in between those communities was really this imaginary line that they cross on a daily basis. That can't happen at the moment. There are checkpoints now manned by police and defense personnel where people have to show permits in order to get from one side to the other, regardless of the reason. It makes the notion of a quick trip to work, a quick trip to the shops, a thing of the past.
Yeah, I got the permit last night online, which helps a little bit, I suppose, but still got to sit in here.
There's no, obviously, clarity on that, how the border is going to work. So, really, it's a matter of finding out now how it's all going to pan out.
It's long, but we just got to do what we've got to do, really. So, yeah, there's not much we can really do.
And as bad as things might seem at the moment for those border communities, they could get a whole lot worse. The Premier of Victoria just had a news conference a short time ago announcing the latest figures within the last 24 hours, the biggest single-day increase of cases of coronavirus, 288 cases. Doesn't sound like a lot compared to other countries, but in an area that is trying to contain several community transmission-linked outbreaks, it is very significant. They don't believe these not minor, but smaller outbreaks have peaked as of yet. There is a real concern about the economic impact to not only the city of 5 million people, but also the state. That's why earlier state authorities announced hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to support businesses that barely made it through the last lockdown. There's a real concern that many of those that struggled through the first one won't make it through the latest one.
To the United States, the country has seen another record high number of coronavirus cases for a single day. But as Kyle Gibson's reports from Washington, U.S. health officials are increasingly optimistic about developing a vaccine for COVID-19 by early next year.
It's being called the summer surge, coronavirus case numbers rising as the country heats up. The U.S. reported 60,000 new cases on Wednesday, pushing its total over the 3 million mark. As well as that national number, at least 5 states, including Texas and Tennessee, set daily records of their own. Even as the numbers spiral upwards, the Trump administration still wants schools to reopen, even objecting to guidelines from the U.S. government itself.
In these guidelines, there are 28 implicit acknowledgments that these guidelines aren't even feasible. 18 times it's mentioned that some of this might not be possible, and 9 times it's mentioned that some of this might not be feasible. So that's embedded into the guidelines, and one specific example I'll give you is on food services. Have children bring their own meals as feasible. Well, there are 22 million children in this country who depend on these meals at schools, who depend on access to nutrition in schools. So that's one example.
The Trump administration has also bet big on a vaccine, launching Operation Warp Speed in May to find one as soon as possible. Top U.S. health official Dr. Anthony Fauci told news website The Hill that a vaccine could be ready by early 2021.
We're really cautiously optimistic that things are moving along quite well with more than one candidate. There are a number of candidates that are in various stages of development. The one that you mentioned, Steve, the Moderna one that was helped developed here at NIH, will very likely be going into advanced phase 3 clinical trials by the end of this month of July.
In the meantime, federal officials are trying to work out who should be first in line for a potential vaccine. At-risk groups like the elderly could be sent to the front of the queue. For now, though, there are much more pressing challenges as intensive care units fill up with COVID-19 patients in the worst-hit states. Giles Gibson for Cgtn, Washington.
U.S. hospitals are facing severe pressure from the coronavirus surge, and Texas has expanded an order to suspend elective surgeries. Texas Governor Greg Abbott raised the suspension from 8 to 105 counties to free up hospital beds. The new order affects surgeries and procedures that are not immediately and medically necessary. In Florida, CNN reports that 48 hospitals have reached their capacity in intensive care units and show 0 ICU beds available. Texas has reported around 10,000 confirmed cases each day in the past 3 days, and Florida on Thursday reported nearly 9,000 new cases. Well, more and more Latin American leaders are coming down with COVID-19. The latest are Bolivia's interim president, Janine Añez, who says she feels good and will isolate while continuing to work. At least 7 of her ministers, including the health minister, have also tested positive. As has Diosdado Cabello, the leader of Venezuela Constitutional Assembly, Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez spent 2 weeks in hospital with the illness, and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro tested positive this week. Bolsonaro is now the subject of criminal complaint. Reporters say he put their lives in danger when he took off his mask. While they interviewed him about this positive coronavirus test, he says he wanted to assure them that he was okay. The journalist has been forced to quarantine. Brazil has registered over 1.7 million cases. On Thursday alone, there were over 40,000 new cases and over 1,200 new deaths. Animal rights advocates may not be happy with it, but bullfighting is now set to resume in Spain after the coronavirus lockdown. However, cross will be seriously restricted, and pressure groups say its popularity is falling. Cgtn's Rahul Pathak reports from Madrid.
Paco Ureña is one of Spain's top bullfighters. His profession certainly creates passionate feelings. Bullfighting's opponents call it a cruel relic of a bygone age. However, one of its biggest fans, the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Ernest Hemingway, fell in love with it, famously writing, "Bullfighting is the only art in which the artist is in danger of death."
Sientes miedo, sientes responsabilidad, sientes pasión.
You feel fear, responsibility, passion, a bunch of emotions like a cocktail moving inside you. The most beautiful thing I've ever experienced.
Matadors across the country are preparing to return to the bull ring following a 3-month shutdown. The COVID-19 outbreak hit just as the season was supposed to get started. Supporters say the resulting lockdown hit bullfighting particularly hard. Now, normally this arena would hold up to 24,000 people, but it remains empty with Spain being in lockdown for the last 3 months. And that's resulted in the bullfighting industry as a whole losing up to 700 million euros.
Las ayudas que se piden son las mismas que cualquier sector.
We need the same bailout as any other industry to take care of the people who are without a job because of the virus. We ask for a specific plan for bullfighting with sanitary measures and economic measures so we can reactivate the industry.
Sanitarias, sino también con medidas económicas que inyecten.
Animal rights activists say the COVID-19 pandemic is merely accelerating the process in which bullfighting naturally dies out. They say they're now confident the rest of Spain will follow the example of Catalonia, which banned it in 2010.
Cada vez es menos popular, cada vez hay menos gente.
It's becoming less popular year after year. If you go to a bullfighting arena, you'll see that most of the people are around 40 or 50 years old. They don't have a young base of public fans. Most young people see it as it is, animal abuse.
Casi no tenemos gente institucionalizado.
Bullfighting here in Madrid is set to resume in October, but with considerably less fans allowed in the bull ring. The test will be whether this most traditional of Spanish pastimes will be able to adapt to life in a post-COVID-19 world and remain popular in the future. Rahul Pathak, Cgtn, Madrid.
You've traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you. But only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? Cgtn. See the difference.
Well, today is the last day of college entrance exams across China. The exam this year was delayed by a month due to the coronavirus outbreak. Most provinces have already finished their tests, while other cities, including Beijing, are now set to wrap up the exams today. Our reporter Sun Ye tells us more from a testing center in the Chinese capital.
So over 10 million students are taking part in Gaokao this year, and some of them are going to begin their final part of the test shortly this afternoon. But over half of all the test takers in the countries have already finished with the highly intense test, and some of the students have told us it's good to finally be able to relax.
After the Gaokao, I need to first lose some weight on my chubby belly.
I feel like I can finally relax, but I'm actually not as happy as I thought.
You finished the exam. Now you can take a rest and relax.
The thing I want to do the most is hug my mom.
I'm really emotional. 18 years gone by. It's not easy.
I want to go to a good college and then meet the right one.
The Gaokao was postponed for a month because of the pandemic, and here in Beijing, students were grounded for a second time in months because of a new coronavirus outbreak in June in the city. And the students, when they came back for the test, they have also to observe the strictest health protocols yet in the country. So the students have to wear a face mask full time during the test, and they have to also have their temperatures taken multiple times a day. But perhaps this year's test is the hardest for students in flooded areas in central China, including some places in Hubei province. That's the place where the coronavirus pandemic erupted earlier this year. Some of the students there have to brave heavy rains and floods just to get to the test centers. Some 500 students in Huangmei County in Hubei province, they actually had to be ferried to a separate test centers earlier this week, and they have to take the test later than the rest of the country. So if the test, the Gaokao, is grueling itself, the conditions this year certainly made it even more testing.
The internet celebrity panda Jinhu, which literally means gold tiger, has just celebrated his 10th birthday in Dalian for a zoo. The zoo also invited 20 human kids with the same birthday to join the celebration. Jinjie takes us to this amazing party.
Smashing up the birthday gift, knocking over the fresh fruit platter, and breaking the basket of flowers. 10-year-old Jinhu likes to play rough.
Jinhu has been in our zoo for 8 years. We treat him like our own kids. We throw a birthday party for him and hope Jinhu is happy and healthy. Today, we also invited young panda lovers who were born on the same day as Jinhu. We hope they are happy too.
It's so amazing to celebrate our birthday together with Jinhu today. We hope that Jinhu eats well and sleeps well and finds a girlfriend as soon as possible. Then we'll have more adorable baby pandas to love.
8 years ago, Jinhu came from southwest China's Sichuan province and settled down in the Dalian Forest Zoo in Liaoning province in the northeast. Active, mischievous, and easygoing, Mr. Jinhu has become a real celebrity with over 100 million views online. Cgtn.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'm Zoe in Beijing. Stay tuned for more on Cgtn.